I feel like there's this universal experience we all have.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's every day, depending on how much of a news junkie you are.
Hmm.
You turn on the TV or scroll through your feed, and you just get slapped with these massive, terrifying headlines about the economy.
It's just the background noise of modern life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Recession looming, growth slowing, market rallying.
Exactly. And everyone talking about it, the pundits, the politicians, the guys in the suits, they all look so incredibly serious.
Oh, serious.
They use these terms like they're discussing the laws of physics. But for the rest of us, it often feels like we're watching a sport where we don't quite know the rules.
That is a really apt analogy.
We know there's a scoreboard, we know we want our team to be winning, but we don't actually know how the points are calculated.
Right, we're constantly told the score, the economy is up, the economy's down, but we rarely, if ever, stop to examine the scoring system itself.
We just accept that up is good and down is, time to panic.
It's panic-inducing, yeah.
Which is why I am so pumped for today's deep dive. We are taking a stack of research centered specifically on lesson #31 from the Money Logic series by Sean and Annie, and we are going to crack open the rule book.
We are.
We're talking about the grandfather of all economic acronyms, GDP.
The gross domestic product. It's the number that rules the world, quite literally.
But the mission today isn't to give some boring economics lecture. We want to do what Sean and Annie do in the source material. Strip away the jargon and figure out why this specific number is the scorecard of a nation.
What counts? What doesn't?
And is the scorecard actually, broken?
It's an essential tool for critical thinking. If you don't understand how the score is kept, you can't really understand the game being played all around you.
So let's dive right in. The source material starts with this fantastic visualization. It says, forget the complex spreadsheets. Think of GDP as the big receipt.
A very grounding image, I think. Imagine a receipt tape like the kind you get at the grocery store, but this one is thousands of miles long. It represents the country's total sales report.
The big receipt.
Yeah.
So every single time a transaction happens in this country, it gets printed on that tape.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes the sheer scope of this. We tend to think of the economy as these abstract giants like General Motors, Apple, Amazon.
Right, the big stuff.
But the big receipt captures all the granular stuff, too.
The source lists every loaf of bread, every car produced, and my personal favorite, every haircut.
Every haircut counts.
There's something so funny to me about that. You walk out of the barbershop or the salon feeling fresh, and you've technically just done your patriotic duty.
You have.
You've added a line item to the national scorecard.
You absolutely have. And that brings up a really important technical distinction that the source touches on, which is the idea of final value.
Okay, let's unpack that. What does final value mean in this context?
Well, think about that loaf of bread you mentioned. Before it was bread, it was flour.
Sure.
And before it was flour, it was wheat sitting in a farmer's silo. If the farmer sells the wheat to the miller for $1, and the miller sells the flour to the baker for $2, and the baker sells the bread to you for $5, if we added all those up, 1 + 2 + 5, we'd say the GDP is $8.
But that's wrong because the wheat and the flour are inside the bread.
Exactly. Would be triple counting.
Hmm.
So GDP only looks at the final transaction, the $5 you paid at the counter.
It's the finished product.
It measures the finished goods and services hitting the market. Yes.
That makes sense. It's about the end product. But what I find really fascinating and maybe a little strange is how this big receipt model just flattens everything. The source makes a comparison between a loaf of bread and a luxury car.
This is the essence of money logic. To a human being, a loaf of bread is survival. It's sustenance. A luxury car is, what, status, comfort, maybe a midlife crisis?
Totally different categories of value.
But to the GDP receipt.
What are they?
To the receipt, they are identical in nature, just different in magnitude. They're just data points with a price tag.
So the receipt doesn't care what the transaction is.
It only cares how much money changed hands.
So it's completely value neutral. If I spend $10,000 on life-saving heart surgery or $10,000 on a ridiculously ugly golden statue for my front lawn,
the scorecard goes up by exactly $10,000 in both cases.
that is wild to think about.
It is, but it answers the core question that lesson #31 is trying to solve.
Which is?
How do we know if a country is getting richer or poorer? In this specific game, richer just means more transactions. The volume of the receipt tape is the only metric that matters.
Okay, so we have the concept. The big receipt. It tracks the final value of everything produced inside our borders, but you can't just look at a $1 trillion receipt and make sense of it.
No, you need categories.
Right. And the source material breaks this down into what they call the recipe for GDP. Apparently, this massive, chaotic, swirling economy can be boiled down to just four ingredients.
It's the classic macroeconomic formula.
I really appreciate the simplicity here. So let's walk through these four ingredients because I think they actually explain a lot about how our daily lives fit into this big picture.
Sounds good.
The first ingredient is the biggest one, consumption.
Personal consumption expenditures.
Hmm.
In the U.S., this is the heavyweight champion. It makes up roughly 70% of the entire GDP.
70%. So the vast majority of the national score is just us buying stuff.
It is. It's you buying groceries, paying for your Netflix subscription, getting that haircut, buying new tires, going out for dinner.
Wow.
It's households spending money on goods and services.
That actually explains why the news is always so obsessed with consumer confidence. You hear that term all the time.
All the time.
The consumer is worried or the consumer is resilient.
It's because we are the engine. If regular people get scared, say they're worried about a recession, and they decide to keep their money in the bank instead of buying a new TV, that 70% chunk of the GDP starts to shrink.
Yeah.
The whole scorecard can start to collapse.
So, in a way, we are holding the economy on our shoulders every time we swipe a credit card.
For better or worse, yes.
Yeah.
It's a demand-driven model.
Okay. Ingredient number 2, investment. Now, I have to stop here because I feel like this word investment is where, 90% of people get confused.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when I hear investing, I think about opening my brokerage app and buying a share of Apple or Tesla.
Right.
But the source material seems to make a distinction here. Does buying a stock count towards GDP?
No. And that is a crucial insight.
Hmm.
In the language of GDP, buying a stock is just a transfer of ownership.
Okay.
You are swapping your cash for a claim on a company that someone else is selling. No new stuff was created. No service was performed.
It's just money moving from my pocket to your pocket.
Exactly. So for the GDP recipe, investment means business investment in real assets. It's a bakery buying a new commercial oven. It's Amazon building a new warehouse.
Ah, I see. It's spending money now to create the capacity to produce more stuff later.
Precisely. While consumption is about satisfying needs today, investment is about future growth. It also includes residential construction. So if a developer builds a new neighborhood, that counts as investment.
Got it. So stock market gambling, not GDP. Building a factory.
Yes.
GDP.
You've got it.
Ingredient number 3, government spending.
The public purse.
This one seems straightforward. It's the government buying things. But again, there's a nuance here. The source mentions roads and tanks, but what about things like Social Security checks or unemployment benefits?
This is another great catch. The source is very specific. It counts government expenditures on goods and services. So, paying a construction crew to fix a bridge, that counts. Paying a teacher's salary, that counts. Buying jet fuel for the Air Force counts.
But a Social Security check?
Does not count. That's classified as a transfer payment. The government is just taking tax money from one group and handing it to another group.
Because the person receiving the check is going to go spend it anyway.
Exactly. Grandma gets her Social Security check, and then she goes to the grocery store. When she buys groceries, that gets counted under consumption.
Ah, so you'd be double counting.
If the government counted the check and the groceries, we'd be double counting again. Economists are obsessed with avoiding it.
It really is all about avoiding that double count.
It is.
Okay, so we have consumption, us buying stuff, investment, businesses building stuff, and government spending, public works. That brings us to the final ingredient, number 4, net exports.
The trade balance.
This is the stuff we make here but ship somewhere else.
Right. If a Ford truck is built in Detroit but sold to a guy in Munich, that value belongs to the American GDP. Money is flowing into the country.
But it's called net exports, which implies subtraction.
Correct. We have to subtract imports. If you buy a bottle of French wine, that money is leaving the U.S. economy and going to France.
Okay.
So we take all the exports, money coming in, and subtract all the imports, money going out.
So if we buy more from the world than we sell to the world,
then that number is negative, and it actually drags the GDP down.
Okay, so that's the formula. C plus I plus G plus net exports. It's elegant in a way. You take the chaos of 330 million people and boil it down to 4 variables.
It is elegant. It simplifies the narrative into a single trajectory. Is the line going up or is it going down?
And that brings us to the so what factor. Because honestly, I don't run a factory. I don't set interest rates at the Federal Reserve. Why does it matter to me personally if the GDP is up 2% or down 1%?
That's a fair question.
The source material makes a pretty bold claim here. It says this one single number determines everything. That feels like hyperbole.
It sounds like it, but when you look at the downstream effects, it's not far off.
Yeah.
The source highlights two major areas where this touches your life directly.
And those are?
Job availability and the value of the money in your pocket.
Let's look at jobs first. The source connects the score directly to whether people have work. Walk me through that chain reaction.
It goes back to the ingredients. If GDP is growing, it means the buckets are filling up. People are buying more.
Consumption.
Okay. Companies are expanding.
Investment.
Right. To meet that demand, to bake the extra bread or build the extra cars, businesses need labor.
They physically need bodies to do the work.
Right. So a growing scorecard usually creates a tight labor market. Companies have to compete for workers, they hire more people, and eventually they have to pay higher wages to keep them.
So growth on the chart equals options for me as a worker.
Generally, yes. Now look at the inverse. What happens when the numbers stop going up?
The source calls this trouble, or, the R word, recession.
A recession is basically when the receipt gets shorter. We are buying less stuff.
Okay.
If we buy less stuff, businesses don't need to make as much. If they don't need to make as much, they don't need as many workers.
And that's when the layoffs start.
That's when the layoffs start. So when you hear GDP is slowing down, you should translate that to job security might be getting shaky.
So the source frames it as a binary state then. It's either growing or it's in trouble.
Pretty much. It's like a shark, right?
It has to keep moving forward or it dies.
That is the nature of the modern economic system. It demands constant expansion.
Then there's the second impact the source mentions, currency strength. This one always feels a bit like magic to me. How does a sales receipt change the value of the dollar in my wallet?
It's all about global confidence. Think of the U.S. like a giant corporation. If you see a company with massive sales growth, you want to invest in it.
Sure, I want a piece of the action.
Well, international investors do the same thing with countries. If the U.S. GDP is booming, if we are winning on the scorecard, investors from around the world want to park their money here.
They want to buy U.S. real estate or bonds or companies.
And to do that, they need U.S. dollars.
Ah, okay.
Exactly. They have to sell their yen or euros and buy dollars. That high demand drives up the price of the dollar.
So a strong GDP makes the dollar stronger.
Which means when you go on vacation to Europe, your coffee is cheaper. Or when you buy imported electronics, they cost less.
So we really are keeping score. And the stakes are incredibly high. It determines if I have a job, and it determines what my paycheck can actually buy.
It determines the economic weather we all live in.
But, and here is where the deep dive gets really interesting, the source material throws a massive curveball at the end.
It does.
It's a section called the missing pieces.
This is the critical thinking portion of the lesson.
Because so far we've been talking about GDP like it's the ultimate truth. If the number is high, everything is great. If the number is low, everything is terrible. But Sean and Annie point out a massive blind spot.
The twist.
The source explicitly states GDP doesn't measure happiness or quality of life.
And that brings us right back to that value-neutral concept we discussed earlier. The receipt captures activity, not benefit.
The source mentions quality of life, and I think this is where the disconnect happens for a lot of people. You hear the politicians saying, the economy is booming, GDP is up, and you look around and think, yeah, but I'm miserable.
That's the GDP paradox. Let me give you a classic example that economists discuss, which really illustrates this flaw.
Okay.
It's often called the broken window fallacy or the disaster paradox. Imagine a massive hurricane hits a coastal city.
Okay. Terrible tragedy. Homes destroyed, businesses wrecked.
It's a humanitarian disaster. But look at it through the eyes of the GDP scorecard.
Uh-oh.
Suddenly, you have to hire thousands of construction workers to rebuild. You have to buy tons of lumber, concrete, and glass.
You have to buy new cars to replace the flooded ones.
Exactly.
So, wait, the hurricane makes the GDP go up?
Often, yes. In the short term, a disaster can look like growth on the scorecard because it forces a massive amount of spending.
But the people aren't better off. They're just spending money to get back to where they started.
Exactly. The scorecard counts the activity of rebuilding, but it doesn't subtract the destruction of the homes. It counts the pluses, but ignores the minuses.
That is actually kind of disturbing. It measures busyness, not wellness.
Busyness, not wellness, is a perfect way to put it. The source also alludes to things like commuting.
Commuting.
If you sit in traffic for 2 hours a day, you are burning gas. That counts as consumption. You are wearing out your car, which leads to repairs. That's consumption.
So sitting in gridlock is good for the economy.
According to GDP, yes. But if you walked to work, stayed healthy, and spent $0, GDP hates that
You're being inefficient.
because you aren't generating transactions.
So you could theoretically have a nation with a massive GDP record-breaking numbers, where everyone is sick, stressed, working 3 jobs, breathing dirty air, and divorced.
Theoretically, yes. Divorce is another one. It generates legal fees and forces the creation of 2 households instead of 1. Great for GDP, terrible for the family.
It's striking to me that we have this incredibly sophisticated tool to track the exchange of goods. We count every loaf of bread, but we have no line item for satisfaction.
It really raises the question, are we winning at economics or are we winning at life? Sometimes those two things are aligned. Generally, wealthier countries do have better standards of living, but they can move in opposite directions.
The source highlights the irony that a scorecard of a nation might miss whether the people in that nation are actually content.
It's important to remember that GDP was designed in the 1930s and 40s. It was created during the Great Depression and World War II.
So the goal was different.
The goal back then was purely industrial. Can we produce enough stuff to survive and win the war? It was a survival metric.
It was.
It was never intended to be a measure of national happiness or spiritual well-being. But over the decades, we've sort of tricked ourselves into using it that way. We treat it as the ultimate leaderboard.
So when we see those talking heads on TV panicking because the growth slowed down by 0.1%, we should remember what they're actually talking about.
He's talking about the volume of transactions. Nothing more, nothing less.
So let's recap the journey we've been on today. We started with the confusion of the news and found our scorecard of a nation.
We looked at the big receipt. We realized it's a tally of everything from lattes to aircraft carriers.
We broke down the recipe into our 4 ingredients. Consumption, that's us. Investment, that's business expansion. Government spending, and net exports.
And we raised the stakes. We saw how this one number dictates the job market and the strength of the dollar.
But we also found the blind spot, the missing pieces.
Yeah.
The fact that you can have a winning scorecard on paper but still feel like you're losing the game of life.
It's a reminder that while GDP is the scorecard for the nation, it doesn't have to be the only scorecard for people.
That's a great point. Next time you hear a report about the GDP, I want you, the listener, to picture that giant receipt tape unfurling across the country. It counts the cars, it counts the bread, it counts the haircuts.
It tells us if the machine is running fast or slow.
But it doesn't tell us how the passengers are feeling. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on today. We know what goes on the nation's scorecard sales and spending, but based on what we learned about the missing pieces, I want to ask you this. If you were to create a gross domestic happiness scorecard for your own life, a receipt that tracked the things that actually make life good, not just the things that cost money, what ingredients would be on that recipe?
Now that is a metric worth tracking.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.